Hello, Leah.
Hello.
We probably covered some of this the last time we spoke, which was about a year and a half ago in April 2021. But for my listeners, can you just tell us where you grew up and how you got into music in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and I was given piano and singing lessons at a very young age. But I think that's really common for a lot of kids, not really intending for their child to actually pursue music. I also was a dance lessons, but definitely did not pursue that, and just fell in love with it from a really young age. And then somehow ended up in like the indie rock scene in Boston. I'm never ended up going to school for it. That's a long story, but yeah, and then quit for a while and here I am back again.
Didn't
So
you tell me that when you first was Turkish Delight your first band?
yes, definitely.
And I
Yeah.
think you told me when we spoke before that you really kind of was on the job training, but you learned as you went along with it.
Yeah, because I'd really given up music, piano at like age 9, singing at, I did singing from like 9 to 15. It wasn't the cool thing to do. And so I gave that up. So yeah, I never really got like the Berkeley kind of musical training. Didn't I did very little performing. So yeah, suddenly it was like being on a stage, and it was definitely working with other musicians. So it was definitely on the job training, you could say, for sure.
And things
Yeah.
happened pretty quickly for you guys because you guys became pretty popular in a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all that really youthful energy, and you're just really passionate. You're just constantly working on your band, promoting your band. It's like what you do 24 hours a day. Really, at that period of time, it was bound to do well, really. We were just so into it.
And of course, Betwixt was like a real. I know you guys. I was going to ask you. I after we spoke, I believe you did that reunion because I caught some of that and watched it online. You
Oh,
did like
nice.
it was like a Zoom reunion type thing, and then did you actually do a full on show as well?
Yeah, we did spacing out right now. Oh yeah, we did it at the Plow and Stars. It was really cool. The guys were a bit nervous because they wanted me to commit to a few more rehearsals, but I just didn't have the time. I work full time and don't have a lot of vacation time. So we did, I think, one rehearsal before the New York show. We did a show in New York, and then one more rehearsal. And I really worked hard to practice at home because I didn't want to make a fool of myself or make a fool of the guys. And once we all got together, it really clicked, and it was pretty amazing for not playing together for 20 years. We didn't really want to do like book a huge place because obviously we hadn't played in a long time. We haven't been putting albums out, but there was a lot of enthusiasm. People were like standing on chairs to see us, and it was really, really cool seeing some old friends from, other bandmates bringing up friends I hadn't seen in 20 years. So it was a really great show, and it sounded really good.
You are in two very popular bands. Both those bands were great, very different too, completely
Yeah.
different, but
Yeah.
interesting. And then I believe you did the Glass Set after that, or you were in
Yep.
another band too,
Yeah. Band Butterfield 8. We never
Butterfield 8,
recorded
right?
anything. It was fun though.
You guys dressed up nice.
Yeah. Well, it was my first time being in a band with another woman. So we were just like, what are we wearing tonight? And we would like plan our outfits. It was pretty fun.
I saw Butterfield 8 once. I did not see Turkish Delight, but I did see Betwixt and Butterfield 8, definitely.
Nice.
Um, okay, just to move fast forward here, because I'm really intrigued about what you've been doing. When you were last on, you had just released Simple Folk. And
Oh,
since then,
wow.
you've been really busy because you released short stories in October 2021 and
Yep.
then cut ups last month.
Yep.
Did you have a lot of these songs already written, or did you like have to? I mean, did you have like a stockpile of songs? Is that why you
Yeah.
released 3 records in a year and a half, which is pretty incredible, by the way?
Thank you. Yeah, no, great question. I had been trying really hard to release the songs on Simple Folk for about 2 years. And I was having trouble trying to work with Sean Wardis, who I'd worked with on my first and only solo album in the 2000s. And he's a great guy, but we just didn't work together well virtually. So I said, well, why don't you put some guitar tracks down? I'll throw them, in the studio. We'll get some other backing musicians. And he was like, well, he didn't really have any guitar tracks because that wasn't the way he remembered working with me. So it was just like, oh no, I don't have an album. I've been talking to someone for a year. So I called Richard. I'm like, Richard, I don't know what
Richard
to
Marr.
do. Richard Marr, sorry,
Yeah.
from Galaxy Park. I was like, I don't know what to do. He goes, well, he had just been kind of nurturing studio musicians, which is kind of something you think about when you think of like, Lady Gaga going into the studio, she has studio musicians. Usually DIY people, we don't have this like, studio musicians per se. So Richards has really started something there. He has so many different types of bands that come in, whether they're punk. I think he's had some Irish music people come in, singer-songwriter. And so he has these two guys, Alex, and they are touring musicians, but when they have time, they make a little extra cash doing the, studio musician, and they're both trained, incredible. Alex Brander, the drummer, he's like trained in Latin drumming, of course, obviously rock drumming. Alex Stern is a trained musician, and he's playing, I think when he's not sleeping, he's playing guitar. So he's, just incredibly talented, incredibly versatile. Has a lot of different varying tastes in music. So anyway, suddenly Richard was like, let me see what these guys can do. So they took my very raw, literally just vocals, and what they came up with was unbelievable. I was
On Simple
like,
Folk you're talking about
yes,
now. Yeah.
I was like, this is like every dream I had in high school, all the 80s bands like I loved, I was like, this is my dream. And I even put out in my press release, my teenage dream to have an album that sounded like this. It was amazing. So that's actually what inspired me. All that great music and just enjoying really doing that inspired me to just start writing like a fiend. So I wrote all new material, 4 short stories, and I had a focus. It was to write short stories about my life, about people, not about myself, but mostly about people I knew or I'd met. And then after that came, sounded amazing as well to me. I was like, I'm going to, get inspired. I want to do another one. So that's how all this came out very quickly.
So you didn't have them all the songs stockpiled?
Not at all. No,
Okay,
I had
so
nothing. I was
I'm
like, not even thinking about music for like 15 years.
I don't have all the track listings in front of me, but I'm thinking it's probably like 30 songs for the 3 albums. Was it around there?
Yeah, 30, probably like 27 or 28, and then a couple covers.
That's a lot of songs.
Yeah. And not one. I don't think that there are any that I didn't end up using. And there were none that I have extra either, for that matter.
And I know that I love the song Blameless because it came out in my Spotify top 5 most listened to songs for the year, which I can understand because I was fascinated by that song, how it started really slowly and then the tempo picked up and it became more of a rock song. And it's like a two songs in one. Yeah, I really love that.
And that's the beauty of working with a collaborator, bringing completely different energies, completely different styles of music together. But we both somehow agree.
I actually called Richard Marr last night because I wanted to talk to him, and he gave me his perspective because I'm completely enamored with the music relationship that you have with Alex Stern, Alex Brander, and Richard Marr, because it's like a team. You mentioned Lady Gaga. To me, it reminds me of the way old artists used to do things at Chess and Motown.
Yeah.
The singer would come in, or the band, and there'd be a full band in there. Richard's doing something that no one else is doing was done years ago.
You are right. Yeah, because I just saw a thing about Aretha Franklin and a movie, and I was watching and I'm like, wow, this reminds me a lot, except I did everything virtually, but still it was really similar. It was like, okay, I have these ideas, I have these melodies, and then there's a guitar part. And 98% of the time I'd like the guitar part. Every once in a while, well, maybe 90%. Every once in a while I'd come and say, well, that's a little bit heavy. That one's a little bit too pop punk. Let's bring it to more like shoegaze. This is a band that I'm thinking of, and I would send it. And Richard would help me translate that a lot. So there were 1 or 2 songs on Simple Folk short stories where I said, this isn't really the direction I want to go in. So I changed it up.
And I understand the way Richard explained it to me is Alex Stern kind of deals with the arrangements and Alex Brander's the drummer. So Alex Stern kind of, as far as the music goes, does all the arranging.
Yes.
And they work around your melodies and your songs and melodies. It's fascinating. I mean, did it take a long time for you guys to get that routine going?
No, it was strangely quick. I had done something like that before with musicians that Richard had introduced me to. Andy, who guitarist for the band Codetta, and
Oh,
he's in,
yeah.
apologies, he's a bunch of bands I haven't really.
He's in bird language now. Yeah, I know who you're talking
Yes,
about. The
he's a
guitar
great
player.
musician and very different type of music, from my singer-songwriter. But he had kind of a heavy aesthetic. So I had sat down with him. I had this idea for rock opera in 2007, and I sat with him and I sang, and he strummed the guitar parts. I believe that took somewhat longer, and it was different, and the music was really different, but it was the same deal. It was melodies that I would come up with.
There's not many people that can do what you're doing. It seems really difficult to me. It seems like without just walking in and or calling or doing virtually a melody for someone to pick it up, that says a lot about these musicians as well.
It really does. And I mean, Richard says I have a really good ear. And I also come in with ideas and arrangements at times too, and kind of I could be my own producer on the album as well. I do some production, but no, you're 100% right. I mean, having that ability to come in. The last album, there was actually some interesting things that happened. There were one or two songs
On
that
cut ups, you mean? Cut
yes,
ups?
cut ups. Yeah. There were one or two songs that I just didn't see
Excuse
were
me.
my vision. So it was really hard to translate. So what ended up happening was I actually used the music that Alex wrote, and I wrote a totally different song to it.
Wow.
I came up with one, I used the same lyrics. Another, I did have some lyrics like in a notebook, and I just put them to the song. And there were two other songs I actually changed up the rhythm a little bit of what I was singing. But so that was different. It just didn't agree with me what he had come up with, but I also, really liked what he'd come up with. So the songs are much cooler actually. So that was a really different process from the first two albums.
Do you get involved in the mixing process as well?
Oh, I'm there for the mixing. I'm in charge of the mixing, like Alex and Alex, they certainly have input, but I'm the person who, I put my foot down.
You make the last calls, yeah.
So the first call and the last, so for the first song, Cut Ups on the album, Richard wanted to kind of make it more ethereal, bring the vocals up a little bit. I said, no, leave it like leave that Black Sabbath bass in there. I love the song. It's very indie. And it was really funny. We were playing on a radio show in the UK, and one of the other bands, really young kids, and they totally sounded like Black Sabbath. And that was the song that they put, that song next to that song. It was kind of funny. But I love that that song just came out of nowhere. It doesn't sound like anything on the first two albums. It's very indie. It's really strange and interesting. And so I really like what Alex came up with that song. But I really put my foot down. I don't want the vocals high in the mix for this. I want that bass to sound really raw. I don't want this to sound very overproduced. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of input. The second song, I cut out some of the vocals at the end, and I just wanted instruments. And Richard and Alex looked at me like I had two heads, and I'm like, I'm sorry, it's my album. So, I do have a lot of say in these songs.
It is your album. It's your music, so
Yeah.
you do, I'm glad that you're like that. The differences between the records, they're not major, they're subtle, but the songwriting in some of the songs is kind of different. How would you explain that? Is it just what's going on in your head at the time?
Well, some of it is there was a little bit more collaboration on this album, or I changed up what I was doing. Some of it is, just maybe I'm growing as a songwriter. I'm growing in confidence a little bit. I don't know. I'm not sure.
You've been at this for a long time now. So you've been writing songs for like 25 years or something like that, maybe even a
Yes,
little
so
longer.
1993. I mean, I wrote songs in high school, but I never really did much with them. But yeah, 93 was, then I took that big break between like 2008 and 2021. So
Of course, I'm just basing this on Bandcamp because you have a pretty good following. You have a lot of supporters. So are these fans
yeah.
that have been with you all along, or do you think you're making new fans with your solo music as you go along?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say they were fans with me all along, but we never really had that ability. We never got signed. We had some great local labels who helped us out, and little things like we were on a CMJ compilation, and that people to this day say they learned about Turkish Delight from that. but there's a couple of things going on here. We never really had like a massive big label to like help us and do all the touring. We broke up. A lot of my bands break up. A lot of my bands don't sound like the band prior. You know, you
Yeah.
see, I don't want to mention any names, but you do see some artists that go out on tour and they sound just like the band they were in 5, 10, 20 years ago. What I do is going to sound very different. It's just the way I am. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely a handful of people that have been following me, but really, you know, I've picked up a lot of new fans, and a lot of it has been through the label I Heart Noise. They did a reissue of the Turkish Delight albums in 2017 and 2018, and they introduced Turkish Delight to a whole new group of people. Some of those people really like my new stuff. Many of them don't. So, you know, it's very different. So yeah, I guess it's just every day. Hopefully I'm acquiring new fans. And then maybe even people who knew about Turkish Delight or Betwixt or Glass Set will come across my music and like it or not. You know,
Y-
it's kind of the
Your,
way it is, you know?
your singing style is different on the earlier bands, but on these records, your voice is a very familiar voice. You have a really good voice, and you know
Thank
it's a
you.
Leah Callahan song when you hear it. So you decided to play a live show recently with the band. Was that the first live show you done with your
Yes,
solo stuff?
first live show with the solo stuff. Yeah. And I mean, I really had so much fun at the Betwixt show. I'm like, I want to do this again. This is a lot of fun. So that was probably what motivated me to do it. And also just giving people, I'd gotten a few comments on Facebook, like, so when are you playing live? You know, and I'm like, you know, well, it's all well and good, Leah, that you're posting this, but we want to see you live, you know? So I'm like, all right. So, you know, it was really difficult to get, I wanted that band. I wanted the two Alexes to play back me up. These are the songs they've written. I want them to be there. That was really hard to do. They're always on tour. Somehow it worked out. I got Chris Brunel, who's actually the singer for the Stearns, and
Right,
he's a musician.
on
He played
bass.
bass.
I saw
Literally
the
had
footage.
one
Yeah.
rehearsal. It was awesome. And I mean, just it was nice to play in person with those guys too.
They
For
have
the
really
first
good
time.
chemistry, those guys. So
Yeah.
it's having those guys to get, that was a smart move on your part rather than trying to get different
Yeah,
musicians.
I mean, it might have been a shit show though. Like if I just try to get like random people. Alex actually said he worked on some charts for me. So I have these songs and I can actually, you know, try to hire musicians, other musicians to play, but I don't know. It's a lot of work for a little teeny show, you know, to pay people and get all that rehearsal and everything. And I'm just glad it worked out. I really enjoyed it. If I have the opportunity to do it again, I definitely would. It was really cool. And it was really very much for me to hear these songs live and to perform them. That was exciting, you know?
Just going back to Richard for a second, because you must obviously like working with him because you've worked with him a lot now. What is it that draws you to Richard that makes you like working with him as a producer, engineer, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, he has been like an angel, like literally got me back into music back in 2006 or 7 when I ran into him at the Ugly House in Alston across from Twin Donut. I walked by. He's like, Leah.
I've never heard it called the Ugly
Oh,
House.
not
It's
the ugly, oh, the
the
greenhouse.
greenhouse.
Sorry, I'm
Well,
confusing with another house.
it's not there anymore. You know, they ripped
No,
it down and there's a big
it's
condo
really
there.
fancy condos now. Yeah, so he sucked me back in. He's the one who's really empowering me to get back on the horse and say, Leah, and he believes in me and he's like, do it. And I'm like, you know what? I even in my own life, I've had close friends who are just like, Leah, why are you doing this? You know? So, but he's never said that to me. He's a dreamer himself. And he had this dream years ago, he was going to have his own studio. And those aren't easy to do. A lot of people have had studios and failed, you know. He's very much a dreamer and he's definitely pushed me. He's definitely backed me as a friend. So yeah, I'm loyal to him. I'll do every album until I stop doing music with him.
He gives you the same kind of high praise, by the way. When I talked to him last night, he was rambling on and on about how great you are. He loves your voice, calls you real talent. Like, you know, not that he doesn't work with untalented people, but he really
Yeah.
thinks you're something. He's really like, one other thing I wanted to ask you about cut ups. You covered a Bowie Eno song.
Yeah, yeah.
So are you a fan of those guys from way back? I mean, have you been a Bowie fan for a long
Yeah,
time?
huge Bowie fan, you know, since I was really young. And so that was really what inspired me to do this album because I couldn't think of anything. I just wasn't inspired. And I saw a chance happen to see a biography on Bowie on public television, and it got me. So when I was a Bowie fan, that was before the internet. That was before there were like
Right.
300 books written about him. So suddenly I went back on the internet. I watched all these movies and videos and interviews, and I read all these books, and I caught up with a little of his later, more recent music that I hadn't really been familiar with. And so I got inspired by like everything. So I used a lot of the BPMs, a lot of the actual rhythms of his songs, especially from the Berlin era, the late 70s. I used a lot of the
That's
BPMs.
when he worked with Eno. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried
Yeah.
to shake up what I was doing because I as a writer who just writes with vocals, I wanted to shake up the rhythms a little bit and do something different. And he has like this kind of funk rhythm going on. So
Mhm.
use the BPMs. I started to try to push myself to write more esoteric things, more weird stuff. I wrote about the devil, ended up being not about the devil at all in the end, but so I started to like, okay, and then the first song, Cut Ups, is actually, he used the cut up method, like William Burroughs. He would take, maybe newspaper fragments and then try to make a song out of it. So I took some of my favorite songs by him and I took out a bunch of phrases, and he would cheat too. He didn't always like, he will admit that he never really just did real cut ups where you literally have to write the song with whatever you throw on the floor. But so I took phrases that I thought these might all work in a song, and I just threw them in the song and they work really well. So
That's
I stole,
fantastic.
basically those were all Bowie lyrics, almost the whole song except for the chorus.
Wow, that's interesting. I have to ask you, do you listen to a lot of new music now? Is there anyone that you're into now that you listen to? Or do you go back to the old
Yeah.
stuff?
No, I mean, I don't, yeah, I do and I don't. I listen to a lot of different music. I listen to a lot of world music, Brazilian music, singers. I love singers, Brazilian singers. Friends of mine have like random, European bands that no one's heard of in this country that I'll listen to. So yeah, I listen to a little of everything, and I definitely listen to a lot of 80s.
Were there influences for you from back then that you've carried along with you
I
besides
mean,
David Bowie?
yeah, no, my real influences, I would say, as a high schooler, would be like Susie and the Banshees, The
Mhm.
Cure, all the British bands from the late 70s, early 80s, and actually still listen to The Cure now. I was listening to The Cure the other day, and that stuff doesn't get old. There's a radio station, there's a college radio station near where I live, and they've come back online. They were away for a long time, and they literally just play 80s music, which is kind of not really what college radio stations are supposed to do, but they just play 80s music. It's really fun to hear all this old music I haven't heard in years and years. Because FNX used to play that,
Right.
BBC used to play, I listen to college radio. I do listen to some new artists. There's no one that really blows me away right now. But I do try to keep my mind open and listen to a lot of different things.
Cool. So are you going to take a break now, or you already got another record in the works? I mean, 3 albums in
Yeah.
what, a year and a half? That's pretty
Yeah.
phenomenal.
I am not pushing myself to do an album. If I had wanted to say I was going to have one out next year, I should have had it written by now. So I worked really hard on promoting this last album. Believe it or not, even doing that one show was a lot of work. Just rehearsing on my own, trying to memorize all those songs. That was really hard to not fall flat on my
You've gotten a
face.
lot of press. Good
Yeah, and that's
press.
all me. I work really hard, and thank you for people like you who do respond to my emails. I probably sent out 186, maybe 196 personal emails to
Wow.
promote the album. That's just for the press, not the radio or anything else. So I work really hard on that stuff, and I do want to take a break, although I'm definitely open to continuing to write. And I actually have been talking to Chris Brunel from the Stearns, and we'd love to do like a duo, like the two of us, and put out an album together. Because it's not my album, I wouldn't be able to dictate, to speed it up. So it might not come out next year, but I'm definitely curious to work with him. He has a very much like an 80s kind of Britpop aesthetic
Yeah.
as well, even though he's like 13 years younger than me, but he still loves that 80s like Britpop. And we have worked on a few songs virtually. And now that COVID is a little bit better, we will probably work together in person a little more, but that's going to be a lot of fun working with Richard. And I look forward to that album, and definitely trying to challenge myself to think of a really it's tough for me because I think every album is so good. It sounds really arrogant, but I would have trouble topping. I love cut ups. I love the first song. I love all the songs. And I'm like scared that I won't be able to come up with something better, but I do want to come up with something even better in my
I think
mind.
you and
Better.
Chris working together sounds really good. He has a really good voice too. The Stearns
Yes,
were a decent
definitely want to
band.
have him sing. And they're working on a new album as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So basically, you're going to take it easy for a little while.
Yes, I'm gonna take it easy and maybe not be like, I need to write a new album now. So if that means nothing comes out this year, that's okay. I did have a goal of 10 albums in 10 years. So I'm gonna have
Wow.
to work harder in the next year.
I love your ambition. And I want to thank you for coming and talking to me again, because I'm a big fan of yours. I have been for a long time,
Thank you
and I
so
really
much.
appreciate it. You're doing fantastic work here, and I love it all.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Oh, most welcome.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.